This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
All right, let's get it going here on Diamond Conversations, of course, brought to you every single week on the Place to Be Nation podcasting network. If you didn't know by now, my name is Ian, and every single week we sit down and we have a Diamond Conversation with somebody from the game of baseball, somebody who's got a very rich history in the game of baseball, and none better than today's guest as we welcome in an absolute Major League Baseball great, the one and only Mr. Jerry Royce, who we all know from his years with the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Houston Astros, the Los Angeles Dodgers, the St. Louis Cardinals, and everywhere in between. So thrilled to have you on today, Mr. Royce. Thanks for joining us.
Ian, thank you. Doug, great to have you on board.
Absolutely. Oh, without a doubt. And, I got to say, this is one of those interviews where I don't even know where to start. I don't know where to end because there's so many questions that we have about your career. But we'll start with one really easy one, and that's how are things going with you in this current day and age, 2020?
Well, like everybody else, there's adjustments made, and it seems that you make them not only every day, but sometimes you have to shift and change speeds a couple of times during the course of a day to get through. But there are other people that are suffering a lot more, so you make the adjustments and move on.
Yeah, very well put. And it's been an interesting one, no doubt. I mean, we've talked to so many guys throughout the last couple of months. It seems like everybody's got a kind of a different outlook on how the year's kind of projected. But I still think it's really cool that one thing that's been consistent is everybody's been really cool to connect with and speak and chat. And baseball has really had a big spot in filling in some gaps for a lot of people. And I think that's a great thing, even throughout all this craziness that we've been living through.
Well, they put it together makeshift. Of course, there's negotiations and concerns about everybody's health. Plus, there's concerns financially for everybody. And you have to also consider the fans. So the best that baseball could do was what they put together. Maybe if they had more time and more planning and some experience on how to deal with a situation like this, perhaps they could have done it better. But under the circumstances, with what they had to work with in the time frame that they had to work it, I think baseball's done a pretty good job. But for fans out there who are looking for something more traditional, more along the lines of the way it used to be, this isn't your year to be a baseball fan. So what I would suggest to everybody, just step back a little bit, understand that people are doing the best they can, and enjoy baseball in this under this kind of umbrella the best way that you can.
A lot of common things that people maybe have related it to strike years or the 1981 season, where that was about as unorthodox as we had seen up to this year. But we're seeing an under 500 team make it into the playoffs, which is a little mind blowing, to say the least. You don't think playoffs and think a sub 500 squad. You've seen maybe teams that have gotten in on the wild card, a couple games above, but never a few under. So this year, definitely. But with that 1981 season, do you see parallels with kind of the feverish nature of trying to put a playoff structure together?
Yes, in some ways, but in other ways, no, not at all. This year is unique, and there's really nothing you can compare it to. Now, there are some things that you look at and say, how does this bend with a traditional way that a fan has watched baseball? And you really could say that you're hard-pressed to do it that way. There's nobody in the ballpark. And to those who are in the ballpark, they're limited with what they can do. Whereas in previous years, you had fans in the stands and there was excitement outside the ballparks. And how it compares with 1981, I really don't see much of a comparison outside of what I just talked about. So, as I said, this is going to be a unique year, and there's no way you're really going to change things or look for things to be on a parallel with other years. So, my feeling is it's kind of like an exhibition or more like tournament play. Right. So, sit back and enjoy it the best way you possibly can.
Maybe it could end like it did in 1981 with a Dodgers World Championship. So I could go that direction.
If that happens and the Dodgers win a world championship, you know as well as I do, Ian, what's going to happen in that situation? It's going to be people asking, was it a legitimate championship?
Right.
Well, yeah, it is based on the criteria by which the teams played their season and went through the playoffs. Yeah, it's going to be legitimate, but it's not going to be the same as if it were a traditional 162 game season.
Yeah, it's almost like baseball's first version of the Final Four or the NCAA tournament, where it is like pivotal for every game. Because really, outside of maybe the first week, every game counted. And if you see these teams that could have made the playoffs, I mean, the Mets are one team that had they won their last 3 games with the way the outcome fell for the wild card last spot, they would have made it. And it's just that it's crazy to think that after the first week, every game really did count, and there's no way to even second guess that.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. It's tournament play all the way, and we'll see who's left standing at the end.
Without a doubt. But I'll tell you something, it's great to talk about current baseball, but it's even better to talk about your era of baseball. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, so, that's more my forte, but growing up, learning about you guys, learning about your generation of ball player and how you guys came through the ranks. You were a St. Louis boy. You grew up as a Cardinal fan, drafted by the Cardinals. What was it like being able to play for your hometown team?
What's interesting, and I thought about this the other day, is that I graduated from high school in 1967. And then the winter of 67 and 68, I attended Southern Illinois University for my freshman year. And during the summer of 1968, I joined the Army Reserve so that I would have the chance to play a full season in the upcoming years, mainly 1969. So I played a full season in 1969. And even though that was an expansion year, there were a lot of guys who were ahead of me in the Cardinals organization that had some major league experience that went on to the expansion teams, or they filled in the minor leagues for other ball clubs. That left an opening for me. So I went to the big leagues just 27 months after graduating from high school.
Wow.
But backing that up just a little bit, my first spring training was when I was 19 years old. It was less than 2 years after I graduated from high school. Now, remember, I walked into a clubhouse that had the remnants of a world championship team from 1967, a World Series team from 1968, and they were on top of the baseball world as far as attention. So at 19 years old, I knew all about them growing up in St. Louis because I listened to Harry, Jack, and Joe Garagiola on the radio, and they told me everything about them. And here I am in just less than 2 years dressing in the same clubhouse as they are, and then going on the field and performing the same spring training drills with them. It's a mind-blowing experience.
So how do you separate that? What's the first lesson you learned coming in as essentially just hot off the presses of being a fan? How do you adjust to that?
Eyes open, mouth shut.
No better way.
It's the only way you can do it because you can't learn if you're talking. So I listened and watched what everybody did and found somebody who I could perform the exercises with and went about my business and tried to pick it up and learn as much as I possibly could during that time I was there. Fortunately, I was a top prospect. And I was one of the last to leave Major League camp and join the team, the AAA team in minor league camp just a little while later. But at the end of spring training, I went to Red Shandy's. He says, Jerry, you're going down. We're going to send you to AAA, but you do the job there. You're going to be back here pretty quick. And I told him, I said, Red, I can't thank you enough for bringing me to spring training. And second of all, being one of the last to be sent to the minor league camp. You gave me a chance to experience what life as a major league ball player is during spring training, and it was a time I never forgot. And boy, did I bust my backside in an effort to get to the big leagues during the 1969 season, and was rewarded because of the job that I did.
Jerry, quick question for me about some of those early spring trainings. I'm a Mets fan. I listen to a lot of Keith Hernandez, your former teammate Keith Hernandez, talk baseball. And a few weeks ago, he told a story about being in Cardinal spring training and a lot that he learned from Joe Ducky Medwick, who is, now 3 generations, 4 generations, 5 generations removed from baseball. Was there anyone in that era that was still around the Cardinals that you were able to learn something from and pass it on maybe?
Oh, yeah, there was everyone around the Cardinals. There was something to learn that first year. 19 years old, I'm as impressionable as I can be, hanging around the pitchers. Now, remember, Bob Gibson had probably the greatest year that a pitcher could ever have in 1968. And I wore number 49. Gibson, his number was 45. And there was only one player that sat between us in the clubhouse because everything was set up numerically, and that was Mike Torres. So just being away from Gibson by a seat, I heard practically everything that went on with him. And just down the aisle a little bit was Steve Carlton, another future Hall of Famer, and I had a chance to observe him. So every minute of every day was a learning opportunity. And if it wasn't from the guys who were current Cardinals, there were guys who were former Cardinals who would come in to visit spring training. Stan Musial walked in the clubhouse, and immediately he brought a group of reporters with him and people with cameras, and he had a chance to visit with all the players. Roger Maris was another visitor who the year before in 1968 had retired. Then there were a number of prominent newspaper reporters whose columns I had read growing up, as well as some reporters from magazines. So every day there was something going on. And for me, just sitting back and watching what was happening, it was a learning experience. The only regret I have about the whole thing is that I didn't have the wherewithal to have a pad and a pen and write down everything that happened that particular day, because I would have filled up all kinds of legal pads with anecdotes and things that I could have written a book about just from spring training.
It's unbelievable. I mean, and to think, the 4 decades that you spanned, 69 and then retiring in 1990, not to jump ahead because I want to fill in some gaps, obviously, in between, but how much did the game change between coming in 69 and exiting in 1990?
Well, I was there for the first year, the second year of expansion. The first occurred in the early 60s, but there was also some changes in baseball as well. The mound was lowered, there was divisional play, and there was the threat of a strike because the Players Association was showing its muscle as far as getting pension benefits and better pay opportunities for players. Plus, during the late 60s and early 70s, there were a lot of new ballparks. In St. Louis, for instance, they opened a new ballpark in 1966. But in the 70s, we saw a lot of new ones come about in Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, to name a couple. And of course, there was indoor baseball at Houston with the Astrodome. And teams, it seemed, preferred at that point to have multi-purpose stadiums. And as a result, AstroTurf became more prominent during that decade than it had any time in the history of baseball. And fortunately for baseball and for players who are playing today, there are very few turf fields that they have to contend with because the technology of having an all grass surface has by far passed the turf fields that had been there for the years that I played. So there were a lot of changes going on in the early 70s. There were uniform changes. For instance, most teams wore the wool uniforms, but that changed in 1970 when the Pirates moved from Forbes Field to Three Rivers Stadium. And the Pirates in 70 wore the double knits. And within a year, maybe 2, every team had their own version of double knit uniforms. Now, I wouldn't say those were comfortable. They weren't, but they were a lot better than many of the wool uniforms that were worn the generation before. but the fabrics just got better. And in fact, I wore one of the latest iterations of a knit uniform in a fantasy camp a couple of years ago. And I want to tell you, it was so comfortable that when I was at home and knew I was going to be home for the entire day, rather than wear normal pants, I put on a pair of baseball pants because they, at that time, were the most comfortable pants that I had in the house.
That's great. I'll tell you what, though, looking at some of those, like, we even say the Cardinal uniforms, those heavy I mean, they looked like if you wore those out in the sun, and especially on the turf. I mean, what is it, 125 degrees inside of your, your shirt there? I can't imagine what that felt like.
Well, I was fortunate. I did play on the turf field, but when I pitched, it was on dirt. So the heat didn't get into the dirt quite like it did on the turf field. I told a story recently about Lou Brock playing at Busch Stadium on the turf in the summer in left field, which was the sun field. Now, Lou had noticed the temperature got pretty hot. In fact, they had a thermometer at the end of the dugout that registered, if I remember correctly, 120 to 125 degrees. Lou had some discomfort, well, to say the least, on the bottom of his foot. And to his surprise, when he took off his shoe and his sanitary sock, he had a blister that was the exact same imprint of the spikes that were on his shoe. And Lou got to the point to where it was tough playing in those. So the next day game we had, his shoe company, Converse, had given him soccer shoes to wear in the field. And it was odd to see Lou playing in the field with soccer shoes, but when he was due to bat, he slipped back into his baseball spikes. So he wore two shoes depending on what his role was that particular inning. Just an oddity. I didn't know if you knew about that.
I absolutely did not know about that, and that's amazing to see that even with like a blister like that he could be the base running king that he was, and then to think that he would have to suffer with the turf damage is that's amazing. Even more of a credit to his amazing career and his life.
Well, that and the fact that Lou, if you were to take a look, I used retrosheet.org and I ran down all the games that. Many of the games that he played. And one of the things that surprised me, in a 162 game season, Lou played better than 150 games in nearly all that I could find, except toward the end of his career. So you consider the fact that he played half of his games at Busch Stadium, where the temperature in the summertime is hot. And then you add into that Cincinnati, which was a turf field, the Astrodome, which was a turf field. Let's see, I'm going to forget a few. Pittsburgh, which was the tartan turf. It was different, but boy, that was a crazy kind of turf. And then eventually Montreal got an all-turf field. So Lou played the bulk of his career on turf fields, and he did so every day. And he was a base stealer, so his body really took a pounding over the years that he played.
Yeah, unbelievable. And just to think about some of those fields and those stadiums, I mean, when you played obviously in pretty much all of them, how as a pitcher was it different for you to kind of equate for the bounces and the different kind of play the infield would kind of give you, or the outfield with the way the ball would ricochet and kind of roll all over the place? How did you prepare for that as a pitcher?
Well, there really wasn't much I could do as a pitcher. That was more up to the fielders and the coach, who was in charge of the infielders, and the coach who was in charge of the outfielders. It didn't take long for everybody to make the adjustment with regards to the bounces on the turf because you could read it. The rolling, a ball came at an infielder probably a lot harder if it had that top spin, but he could play back another step or so, and that gave him a bit more range on balls to his left and to his right. So what it took away in speed, it also added in the fact that he could play just a little bit deeper on the field. And it brought up a lot of guys who, in the minor leagues, they had to have a little stronger arm because to get that ball across the diamond with something on it, it took a pretty good athlete. So the guys who were playing third and who were playing shortstop, they couldn't have an average arm for a shortstop. They had to have a plus arm if they were going to succeed playing on turf in the major leagues.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, how about the Astrodome? I mean, you pitched in the Astrodome. You know, it's obviously it was kind of like ahead of its time in terms of how it was presented. But what was that transition like for you, going from playing your home games in a stadium like St. Louis, and then going to the Astrodome and having to adjust for no wind, no formalities. What was that like for you?
Well, it wasn't that much of an adjustment for me because, well, pitching, I still was pitching on the dirt. But it was playing inside a big building, and the biggest building you could ever find. I don't know how many cubic feet there were in there, but there was a bunch. The air, it did move around a little bit, but it didn't change like it did outside, particularly in the Midwest. Training was a little bit different playing for the Astros because after batting practice during a homestand, the players went back up to the clubhouse, changed into some running shoes, and we went over to the old Colt 45 stadium where the grounds crew over there cut a hole so that we could do our running, cut a path, I should say. We could do our running in the grass. And that was interesting because the grass, they didn't take care of all of it. So we had a path that was maybe about 12 feet in width that arced parallel to the outfield warning track. But we could never see it because the grass was so high. But we had to train outside because after a week or so inside the Astrodome, your body got acclimated to, well, the cooler summer weather. And when you went to places like Atlanta or Cincinnati or St. Louis or Chicago in the middle of summer, you wondered why you were a bit out of gas. And it was because of playing inside the dome. And even teams, when they came in to visit, they knew that if they spent 2 or 3 days there, their training would put them off just a little bit. And they opted to go over on the tram with us and do their running at the same time. So it was an adjustment for training while playing for the Astros, as well as playing inside during a ball game. I know the fans had to love it because they knew exactly how to dress for the game.
Yes.
You didn't see a whole lot of overcoats, and you may have seen some people in a sweater because there were nights that it seemed a little more cooler or a bit cooler in there. But the seating was all theater style seats, state of the art back in the 70s, as opposed to the wooden or the plastic seats or the metal seats that you saw in a lot of other ballparks.
It's unbelievable. What a great way to look back at that building. It was such a unique structure. But I want to move forward a little bit just because I want to jump around, and not hold you all day because I know we could go on and on and on. But I want to talk about your first All-Star game, the 1975 All-Star game. Now, we talked to Bill Madlock about 6 months ago about it. He was the MVP of the game, but he talked about being in awe of that first All-Star game and that selection. So can you kind of take us back to that and being selected for that All-Star team and what that experience was like for you?
Well, sure. You're playing now with the guys that you competed against during the regular season. So it was a bit strange being friends with guys and talking to them and exchanging some ideas and getting to know them personally. That was the plus side. But the downside is that I always felt that I had an edge if somebody didn't know how I would react to a situation or how I would deal with something. I always wanted that little bit of mystery so that it would create some doubt with an opposing player. But all of that was kind of forgotten once I got to the clubhouse and once I got to meet guys. And I found out these guys not only were the good ball players, but they were pretty good people as well. And I said at that time, I said, what a privilege it is to be around the very best ball players in the game today, at least in the National League. Now, it was different playing against the American League at that time because the only time I saw American League ball players would be in spring training or watch them on TV in the game of the week or in the World Series. So I really didn't know a whole lot about them. But to see them move and to watch them in real time, not on a TV screen, it was a whole different perception. Plus, it was unique, probably unique like a World Series is unique, that you were there for one game and there was a lot of excitement, and it was the focal point of the entire baseball world in that particular moment. So pitching or playing in that game as a starting pitcher for the National League, it was a unique moment for me, and it was the only time in my career that I had ever done it. So it was special. And even though what's hard to believe, though, is that it was how many, 45 years ago? That's what's really hard to believe.
July 15th, 1975, Milwaukee County Stadium. You can't, it might sound like a long time ago, but you could pop it on right now and you can watch it. It's one of those things. You could watch these games with the caliber of players from your generation all day long. I can't get enough of those.
You know, what's interesting about that is that I've come across a number of collectors, and God bless these guys because they collect oddball things that I wouldn't think of doing. There have been some collectors that have approached me and said, I have games that you pitched, and these are obscure games, not only all-star games, not only World Series games, but games from the regular season that I thought were long gone. And one particular collector said, I've got the all-star game from Milwaukee. Would you like a copy of it? And I said, sure, that's very kind of you to send it. So he did. And my wife and I took a look at it. And the quality of it, of what we saw from the DVD, was just like air quality back in 1975.
Yeah.
The commercials were included, so it was like being in a time machine, except this time I wasn't part of it playing on the field. I was part of it as a fan in the stands some 45 years later. I would have never guessed at that day, that July 15th, 1975 date, that 45 years after that I would be watching this game on a flat screen television in a quality that it appeared on TV just the way it happened.
And I love that. That's kind of my forte. I love finding the old sports footage and kind of dissecting it and seeing stuff that you, like you said, you never thought you'd see it like that ever again. But when people have those kinds of games and they bring them forward, it's like a time capsule. And what I love is if people do upload to places like a YouTube or other streaming sites, the fact that you could type in your name and then watch the clips of your no-hitter, that to me it is so special. And I wish there was a wider range platform for MLB to do that. Rather than watch the same movies on the MLB network in the offseason, I wish we could see stuff like the 1975 All-Star game in its entirety. But, I guess we can all have our hopes and dreams at some point in our life.
Ian, let me put it to you this way. In radio parlance, stay tuned. It's going to happen. There's going to be games that you can choose from Major League Baseball's library because they have all of the games stored somewhere, and they're probably right now converting many of them to digital, and it's just a matter of finding an advertiser or a streaming mechanism to where they could show these games on demand. So you may get your wish a lot sooner than you think.
Jerry, I've got one question about a specific game. I want to know about August 25th, 1980. And if it doesn't ring a bell, it was the top of the second inning, and you came up against Nino Espinosa and did something you only did one time in your major league career. Can you tell us a little bit about that home run?
Yeah, I thought it was going foul, but let me give you some background. It was in Philadelphia, and we were matched against one another. And I hit a long foul, what I thought was a foul ball down the left field line, but I followed its arc, and it seemed to just come back into fair play. And I said, I better start running. And then I kind of lost track of the ball as I turned my head and looked for the base. And then I could see the reaction of the players on the field, and I saw the umpire at second base signal home run. So I went into a home run trot that I didn't even know I had. And I later found out that the guys in the bullpen, that the ball hit the top of the fence at the 330 mark at Veterans Stadium. Now, an inch lower, it would have stayed in play. And it hit the top of it, bounced into the netting, which is the foul pole, and that was the only home run that I had in the major leagues. When you hit one, you remember all the details.
That's phenomenal. And in 1980, let's touch on it now. If we're talking about 1980, obviously that's where you pitch your no hitter. And again, that just for two things like that in a season for you, a home run and the no hitter. Take us back to the no hitter and what was going through your head as that final out was made.
Well, it was a culmination of feelings. It went back to 1972 when I reached the ninth inning. And Larry Boa got a double to break up the no-hitter, but I did get the shutout. You never know when fate is going to smile upon you a second time, and it took 8 years for it to happen to me. But building up in the game, warming up, I didn't think I had no-hitter kind of stuff. I didn't think I was overpowering. But what I did have was an offense that exploded for 8 runs and 17 hits. And I was able to keep the ball in the strike zone for most part. And in fact, I think I threw about 75% strikes in that ball game. I actually watched it earlier this year and broke it down pitch by pitch. And I think I threw something like 105 pitches, 73 or 74 were for strikes. So anytime you throw 7 out of 10 pitches over the plate, you're doing a pretty good job. And what was most interesting is that in the last 3 or 4 innings, it only took me 25 pitches to get through it. So I don't know whether the Giants were waiting to get out and get back home so that they can be ready for the 12 o'clock game the next day, or whether it was just one of those things that happened. But I got some plays behind me, and out by out, the excitement and everything just seemed to build toward that the final inning, the final ninth inning. In fact, I was the one who posted on YouTube the final 3 outs. So if you ever happen to go on YouTube and type in my name and say no hitter, there's a pretty good chance that the clip that you see, it's about 2 minutes, it was put up there by me. And one of the outstanding things about it, now that I look about it as an archival type of clip, is that it was Vince Scully behind the mic who set the tone at the top of the ninth inning. You couldn't have done it or scripted it any better if it were a Hollywood script.
Yeah, the best narrator that you could have found. It was Vince Scully, and it gives you every detail. And I watched that clip of multiple times as we were preparing to speak with you. And I love the adulation and the, you could see how happy you are after the final out is made. And Vince Scully does reference that game that you mentioned. And it's so cool. And to kind of look back at it, you can feel your happiness. And that, to me, do you still, when you go back and watch it, you feel that same way when you see that third out?
Not so much, because it's been taken out of context. When I watched the entire game and I got a better feel for it, it brought back some memories that I don't think about on a regular basis. But when I see perhaps that clip, when I speak and show it to people, I feel it just a little bit, because I can sense their excitement and I feed off that. But when I see the final out in a clip, I know exactly what it's going to be. Yeah, it's a positive feeling. I get the warm and fuzzy when I see it, but it's just a different context. And it's another one of those it's hard to believe situations. That was over 40 years ago. So here we sit today talking about it.
I love it. I can't get enough of it. And before we get to the my favorite part of the show, which is the Jerry Royce trivia that we will go through, you said right before when we were talking about the no hitter that you didn't feel like you had no hit stuff. Now, did you feel like sometimes you did have no hit stuff and it didn't translate on all cylinders?
Well, a lot of times the hitters have a say so about that. When you warm up in the bullpen, it's a different mound than what you get during the game. Sometimes it has an effect on you, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I warmed up and I just didn't feel quite that strong, but as the game progressed, suddenly I'm running on all cylinders and things are working. Other times I thought coming out of the bullpen, this could be the night of nights, and it turned out to be a flop. So one never knew until you get into the ball game exactly what's going to transpire. There may have been a string of 25, 30, maybe even 50 pitches where I was able to put the ball exactly where I want with the kind of movement that I wanted to have. but it can go just as quickly too. And you have to find your way back and make the adjustments. So I guess that's why you last so long, or I lasted so long, is because in many cases I was able to make those adjustments and get out of an inning and was able to relocate my pitches and finish a ball game.
It's fantastic. All right, well, we're going to head into the wrap-up portion of the show, and that's like I said, the Jerry Royce trivia. So what Doug does, Jerry, is he comes back and he likes to give you some statistics and tries to test your memory of your career and see if he can either stump you or you might stump Doug. You might surprise him. So, Doug, the floor is yours.
All right, Jerry, a couple quick questions. First, to start off, and this is a newer feature on Baseball Reference that I've just been playing around with. You can now look up your games by umpire and see how different, guys had different ERAs, etc. Off the top of your head, do you know who umpired the most games behind the plate that you pitched?
I can honestly say that I have never given that question a thought. No idea, but I'll throw it out there. It was either Lee Wire or Bruce Fleming.
They're both up pretty high. It's actually Doug Harvey.
There you go.
27 games, Doug Harvey. And what's interesting is that when you go through this, and I don't know how much big a part the umpires did play as far as your pitching performance game by game, but your top three are Doug Harvey, Frank Pooley, and Terry Tata. And your numbers when Terry Tata were behind the plate are great. 9-3, 2.7 ERA, 23 games. You have 74 strikeouts. And then, the numbers are still very good with others, but there's Terry Tata stands out. Was there anything about him as an umpire, or do you think that just might be a coincidence?
Like I said, I never gave that a thought. And I don't know, you can take baseball statistics and turn them around just about any different way, and you'll come up with some interesting thoughts. I know that, that's something that I could use on a radio broadcast if I'm talking about it. I did know this, as an aside to that Roger Clemens, in the years that he pitched, he kept a book on everything. And I mean everything. It included opposing hitters. It included opposing teams, what they like to do. And Roger kept track of the umpires and what their tendencies were behind the plate when they called a particular pitch. So there you go. Yeah, so there you go.
So then on the flip side of it with people at the plate, there's one man who you struck out more than anyone else in your career. You struck him out 29 times. I will tell you, number 2 is George Foster at 26. Number 3 is Greg Luzinski at 18. Do you know who you struck out 29 times?
No, to be honest, I don't.
Dave Kingman.
No, that wouldn't be a surprise. He struck out a lot. I would be interested to know who struck him out more than anybody else. Do you have that?
I can tell you that in about 2 minutes. Ian, if you want to take the floor for a second.
Yeah, obviously we've seen guys run the table, Jerry, and know every single answer right off the top of his head. That's a good one. I guess Dave Kingman too, just to be fair. That wasn't off the wild question.
No, I just didn't give Dave Kingman a thought, and it's been a long time since I've thought about him and the matchups that we had. I know he got me for a couple of home runs, so it wasn't all that one-sided. A strikeout for him was just an out, whereas other guys took it personal if they happened to strike out against you. What's interesting, and this would be another thing to look up, is that how many guys walked more against me than they struck out. That would be interesting. And that'd give you a pretty good insight as to what kind of a hitter they really were. I know one of them was Ted Sizemore, because I just did a study myself this weekend on Ted. He struck out, I think, 3 times against me and walked 8.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, there's a few like that. Billy Williams, 10 walks to 3 strikeouts. Mike Schmidt, the guy you faced the most, 17 walks to 12 strikeouts. I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah, considering that Schmidt struck out a lot, that gives you an indication of how effective he was against me. I was asked recently that when I was told in a situation like this, someone brought this up and said, do you know, and they were trying to be dramatic, do you know that Mike Schmidt touched you for 10 home runs? And I said, yeah, I was aware of that. And then they talked about, he also hit, what was it, 471 against you? And all of that. And they said, can you give us an explanation as to why you think that happened? And I said to him, I said, the only thing I can tell you is that Schmidt happens.
Perfect. They must have been from Philly, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know, but there was a lot of silence, and I can tell that hands were going over the microphones, or they were trying to hit the cough switch.
Well, I just pulled up the Dave Kingman numbers. You're up there. You're number 3 of all time for his people he struck out against. Number 2 is Phil Niekro. And then in 97 at-bats, Dave Kingman struck out against Steve Carlton, the lefty, 36 times.
Wow. Well, that's great baseball trivia.
Oh, yeah. And another, just to kind of put a pin on it, but, we talked earlier about the different generations that you crossed based on the length of your career. Going through some of the people you played against in the last couple of years, Gary Sheffield, one of the greatest hitters of the last 30 years, 0 for 17 against Jerry Royce.
Yeah, isn't that strange? Pete Rose didn't hit for a high average against me either. But then there were some other guys, if you go down the line and take a look, and you said, why were these guys so tough? We've already talked about Schmidt. I'm sure Bob Watson is in there. The oddest one, and I don't really understand why this happened, would be 2 guys from the same team, 2 that are in the Hall of Fame. One was Robin Yount. Robin hit close to 500 against me. And Paul Molitor hit about 220 against me. And I couldn't understand because they batted just Molly usually led off and Robin batted third. So I guess I was fortunate against Milwaukee that Molitor wasn't on base because he could steal a base and set the table for Robin, who hit me so well. So there's a lot of oddities that when you go through those things, I just can't give you an answer why. I guess it's just because. But I guess the inverse of that would be, how come they didn't do that well against everybody else? And if they only hit 300 in their lifetime, who was getting them out and how did they do it?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. Doug, you got anything else before we wrap up?
No, that's it for me. But, I will say that Bob Gibson, the great Bob Gibson, went 3 for 15, 214 against Mr. Jerry Royce.
Did he get a home run or anything against me?
Did he take you deep? Let's see. Bob Gibson just pulled it away. Yep, he hit one. He hit 1 home run.
Wow.
Wow. Well, there you go.
There's another. That's a groove. Was that a groove right there, St. Louis boy up on the mound, giving one to Bob Gibson?
No, I wouldn't give him anything. Not when I'm pitching against him because he was too tough. If you won a game against Gibson, you had to work extra tough because you knew he was going to be tough on your hitters and he was going to be out there probably for the whole game. So you had to be on top of your game if you were going to be victorious against him.
That's a great point. So, we'll head into the wrap up here, and I want to point out, as we tell the listeners, all these great stories that Jerry shared with us, all the anecdotes that he was so open with. But he's got one of the best websites that I think I've ever seen for an athlete, and it is jerryroyce.com. There you've got information, you've got your book, you've got your photos, you've got such a great portal into the world of Jerry Royce. If you want to talk about that, please go right ahead, because like I said, this is probably the best athlete website I think I've taken a look at in quite a long time. And you've got a lot of information on here for fans.
Well, Ian, thank you for saying that. At jerryroyce.com, when you open it up, you're going to see an advertisement immediately for my autobiography that was written in 2014 entitled Bring in the Right-Hander. And I tell all of the stories of 22 years in the major leagues against the backdrop of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and I touch a little bit into the 90s as well. We've mentioned a lot of people on this interview that I talk about in the book, even some of the umpires. So there's a lot of great stories in there. Not all of them are good, and I was trying to be as honest as I could about my career when in my 60s I took a look back at it and said, I probably could have done this a whole lot better, but we all know that bad decisions make great stories. And you've got a lot of good stories in this book. And not only do you get a good baseball book that's humorous, but I personally sign and inscribe each one of them, and I'm the person who runs it to the post office as well. So you can't get any closer to the writer than that.
Yeah, and let's not mention the great items you have in your store as well. I mean, you've got pictures of basically every era of your career available to purchase as well, and not to mention your great photography. So I can't give you enough kudos for the website, and I also will be ordering the book because I would love to read more about it. So I can't plug it enough. It's jerryroyce.com. Jerry, before we say goodbye, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners of Diamond Conversations?
No, Ian, Doug, I certainly appreciate the time and the chance to tell some of the stories. Hope this is the first of a couple of visits, and I want to wish you and your listeners all the best, and please stay safe.
Thank you very much. And we didn't even scratch the surface for some of the things that we wanted to go over. So we will love to have you back on. By the end of this year, maybe we can get you back in and even we didn't talk about the Dodgers. We didn't even get into it outside of the no-hitters. So we'd love to have you back. And if you want to learn more about Diamond Conversations, you can follow me on Twitter. It's at ChadEMB. If you want to follow Doug, the producer extraordinaire, it's at DougBarclay17. So for Jerry, Doug, and myself, we will catch you next week on Diamond Conversations. Have a great, safe one, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Place to Be Nations, JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have over 24 podcasts available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We now offer them to you on two great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, we dive into topics running the gamut from today's WWE to the glory days of yesteryear and the ins and outs of the territory days. In addition to our full-length shows, we also deliver to you special pod blasts on topics old and new.
The Place to Be Nation Pop feed is a veritable treasure trove of great content. Offer tremendous shows covering the land of movies, television, life, comics, and sports, brought to you by the most knowledgeable and insightful folks in the podcast world.
You can find all these great shows, plus archives of our past podcasts from over the past 8 years as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows, plus others, available on PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth search projects, and much more. Be sure to support our site by using www.PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping. We want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar, ProWrestlingOnly.com, and TheHistoryOfWrestling.com as well. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop